Welcome to everyone. I am James Jensen, a contractor supporting Western Area Power Administration and the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs Tribal Energy Webinar Series. I'm filling in for Randy Mannion as today's webinar chair. Today's webinar, titled Energy Opportunities in Tribal Housing, is the third webinar in the 2018 DOE Tribal Energy Webinar Series. Let's go over some event details. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on DOE's Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs website, along with copies of today's PowerPoint presentations. These presentations will be available in about 1 week. Everyone will receive a post-webinar email with the link to the page where the slides and recording will be located. Because we are recording this webinar, all phones have been muted for this purpose. We will answer your written questions at the end of all the presentations. However, you can submit a question at any time by clicking on the question button located in the webinar control box on your screen and typing your question. We will try to keep this webinar to no longer than 2 hours. Let's get started with opening remarks from Tweety Doe. Tweety is a project officer in the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs duty station in Golden, Colorado. Tweety is responsible for overseeing financial assistance awards. She has worked in the energy field for nearly 12 years and has been with the Department of Energy for the past 8.5 years. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Washington and a Master's in International Relations from the University of Denver. Tweety, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, James, and hello, everyone. I join James in welcoming you to the third webinar of the 2018 series. This webinar series is sponsored by 2 U.S. Department of Energy organizations, the Office of Indian Energy Policy and Programs, and the Western Area Power Administration. The Office of Indian Energy directs, fosters, coordinates, and implements energy planning, education, management, and programs that assist tribes with energy development, capacity building, energy infrastructure, energy costs, and electrification of Indian lands and homes. To provide this assistance, our deployment program works within the Department of Energy, across government agencies, and with Indian tribes and organizations to help Indian tribes and Alaska Native villages overcome the barriers to energy development. Our deployment program is composed of a 3-pronged approach, consisting of financial assistance, technical assistance, and education and capacity building. This Tribal Energy Webinar Series is just one example of our education and capacity building efforts. This webinar series, part of the Office of Indian Energy's effort to support fiscally responsible energy business and economic development decision-making and information sharing among tribes, is intended to provide attendees with information on tools and resources to develop and implement tribal energy plans, programs, and projects, highlight tribal energy case studies, and identify business strategies tribes can use to expand their energy options and develop sustainable local economies. Today's webinar will focus on energy opportunities in tribal housing. Attendees will learn about programs and resources that can assist tribes that are interested in improving the energy efficiency and sustainability of tribal housing. In addition to presentations from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Bonneville Power Administration, and National Renewable Energy Laboratory, we will have 2 tribal case studies that share examples of successful efforts to integrate energy improvements into new tribal housing. These case studies will hopefully provide inspiration and insight to others in Indian country who are considering similar projects. We hope this webinar series is useful and do welcome your feedback. Please let us know if there are ways we can make the series better for you. With that, I will now turn the virtual floor back over to James.
Thank you, Tweety. Today we have 5 speakers. I will introduce them all now. Our first speaker is Sarah Olson. Ms. Olson is a Grants Management Specialist for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Southwest Office of Native American Programs. Sarah is a graduate of the University of Minnesota Duluth. She has a master's degree in business administration. She has worked on various projects related to renewable energy and energy efficiency in Indian country, including sustainable construction in Indian country, the President's Action Plan for Climate Change in Indian country, radon, indoor air quality, and brownfield, as well as other environmental review related topics, webinars, regional and national trainings. Following Sarah, we will hear from Carrie Nelson. Ms. Nelson is the program manager for the Low Income Energy Efficiency Grant Program at the Bonneville Power Administration. She began her career at BPA 10 years ago as the residential planner for energy efficiency, and then after a few years transitioned over to become the program manager for the Low Income Energy Efficiency and Tribal Grant Program. She has a Bachelor's of Arts degree from the University of Oregon and a Master's of Science degree from the New School University in New York. Following Carrie, we will have a presentation from Alexandra Terry. Ms. Terry has worked for tribes for more than 2 decades, mainly in southern Arizona, in many capacities. Alexandra came to Tohono O'odham Kiki Housing Association in September of 2011, where her main focus is leveraging of resources for the tribal housing entity. For 7 years, Ms. Terry has been part of the leadership team transforming the organization, including downsizing internal employees and increasing efficiency through contracting projects, thus creating hundreds of local jobs, developing infrastructure, and fulfilling the mission to create affordable housing. Leveraging resources and moving away from cash and carry operation has procured more than 3 times the annual operating capital for projects and fully rebranded the local housing authority, which is on target to spend $19 million in projects for 2018, representing a 4-fold increase in funding. Ms. Terry graduated in 2002 with a BA in Political Economy and Development from Brown University and an MBA in 2008 from the University of Arizona. Following Alexandra, we will hear from Retha Lino. Ms. Lino is an enrolled member of the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, has served as the executive director for the Akwesasne Housing Authority, also known or short for AHA, for the past 14 years, having successfully filled low to high profile positions within the AHA since 1994. Over the course of her 24-year Indian housing career, Mrs. Lino began her tenure as director with a shift from the standard construction method development to a progressive consciousness in renewable energy opportunities and sustainability in construction practices within all of the AHA's projects. Currently, Mrs. Lino is responsible for management of 200 mutual help housing units and 21 low-rent housing units for the elderly, along with the administration of several social and energy efficiency programs and services within the Housing Association. This spring, the AHA will construct its first permanent supportive housing project with the addition of 18 units of affordable housing for homeless Native American veterans and its population's frail, elderly, disabled, and/or disabled tribal members. The AHA is also building the tribe's first community-scale photovoltaic generation plant that will enable the AHA's Sunrise Acres facilities and the Akwesasne Boys and Girls Club to move towards becoming the territory's first net zero facilities, and will offer solar incentives to its low to moderate income families. Our final speaker today is Mr. Sean Esterly. Mr. Esterly is a project manager at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. Sean assists with the coordination of the Office of Indian Energy's Technical Assistance Program, where he utilizes the resources and tools available through NREL and other partners to respond to energy questions and challenges confronting tribes. Sean's other work areas have focused on a variety of topics, including implementing energy solutions for rural areas, clean energy policy and regulation, low emission development strategies, micro and mini grid policies and regulations, and international clean energy policy analysis. Sean has worked with Native American tribes as well as local, state, and national governments to develop clean energy policies and programs and to support energy markets. He has worked extensively in Alaska, Africa, and small island developing nations, allowing him the opportunity to experience a multitude of different energy contexts. Sean holds a master's degree in environmental management and policy from the University of Denver and a bachelor's degree in environmental studies and political science from Eckerd College. So with that, I've introduced all 5 of our speakers for today, and I will pull up Ms. Olson's presentation and we'll get started with that. Ms. Olson, the presentation should be ready at your convenience.
Thank you. It looks perfect. Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Again, my name is Sarah Olson. I'm with HUD's Office of Native American Programs, the Southwest Office. Next slide. My presentation today is just going to give an overview of Indian Housing Block Grant and Indian Community Development Block Grant, a couple of our more major programs, and then just give some high-level discussion regarding some case studies through HUD Sustainable Construction in Indian Country Initiative. And then also just as a reminder that it's HUD policy that we strongly encourage energy efficiency in funded projects. And I think that's just a great win for everyone. The next slide talks more specifically about Indian Housing Block Grant, or IHBG as you might hear it. It's a formula-based grant. Most federally recognized tribes receive it. It comes from the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act, and you can find the regulations for Indian Housing Block Grant under 24 CFR 1000. We have a program guidance 2010-03 that kind of overviews what, for the most part, are eligible activities and administrative expenses under the program. It's mostly used to modernize and operate 1937 Act housing. It's also used for development, acquisition, rehab, and energy efficiency improvements in construction. Next slide. And it can also be used for hiring grant writers for affordable housing applications. And another activity we call a model activity. These are things that might not be housing specifically, but are necessary and supportive of affordable housing in Indian country, such as making sure we have adequate housing warehouses and offices for supplies and staff, construction of college housing so people have affordable housing for college endeavors, which many times is lacking in Indian country, construction and rehab of community centers that aren't dedicated to a certain housing development. So these are ones that are more of a community-wide focus of beneficiaries, and therefore the cost would be prorated. HBG covering some portion of the proration and other funds for the rest. And the next slide talks about program income, and basically there's a variation or exemption from the 2 CFR 200 requirements for program income, and this makes it so tribes don't have to spend that funding first. They can use it for housing related activities that help with any infrastructure, business, or program activities, community and economic development that, as determined by the tribe in the Indian area, would meet one of the following conditions. Under number 2 would either help the tribe or its tribally designated housing entity reduce costs of construction in Indian country for Indian housing, or would make housing more affordable, energy efficient, or accessible, or otherwise practicable, and would otherwise advance the purposes of the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act. And on the next slide, please, it also furthers the discussion of what program income can be used for under this exemption from 2 CFR 200.307, which are the overarching administrative requirements for federal grants. And this talks also about housing-related community development and how that can be accomplished through a program income derived from Indian Housing Block Grant. And this also talks about community facilities, businesses or activities and infrastructure that are owned by the tribe or the housing entity and is necessary for the provision of housing in an Indian area and would otherwise help the tribe or its TDHE, tribally designated housing entity, reduce the cost of construction in the area. Again, would otherwise make housing more affordable, energy efficient, accessible, or practicable, and advances the purposes of NAHASDA. And it doesn't include any activity conducted by the tribe under Indian gaming. The next slide, please. Under 1000.122, NAHASDA grants can be used as a non-federal match for any other federal or state program that you're pursuing. So that's important to know that there's no prohibition under NAHASDA statute or in the Indian Housing Block Grant regulations that retains the federal status when you're using these funds as leverage or match for other affordable housing activities. I thought that was important to note. And the next slide, please. And this next slide talks about Indian Community Development Block Grant, or ICDBG, and that comes from the Housing and Community Development Act statute, and you'll find those regulations under 24 CFR 1003 and 1003.200 to 209 talk about some of the eligible types of projects that you might pursue with Indian Community Development Block Grant. And that could be acquisition of real property for a public purpose, like a community center or health clinic, public facilities improvements or rehabilitation to make those facilities that are already in place more functional, and construction equipment for solid waste facilities or fire suppression systems. Also housing rehabilitation, which can include energy efficiency and I'll say water efficiency improvement too, because the nexus of energy and water efficiency is very important. The next slide. You can use Indian Community Development Block Grant to construct new housing if you have a bona fide community development organization on record with HUD. And so you might, if you don't know if you already have one, you might consider calling our office to grant management and seeing if we have one on record, and if not, working with our office to see how you can get such an entity in place and on record with HUD. You could use these funds for new housing construction. Also, Indian Community Development Block Grant has the same regulatory ability that IHBG does with regard to payment of non-federal share. So basically helping you to use these funds, even though they're federal, to be used as a non-federal match. So that's an important thing to remember about this grant that I don't think many federal grants have. And also this Indian Community Development Block Grant can be used for public service activities, and that can include energy conservation measures and even training to persons, and also doing energy efficiency testing, regardless of if there's any housing rehab activity that goes on after that. So it's basically something that could be opened up as a public program to do that kind of testing in homes in the area. On the next slide, please. Also, again, with ICDBG, you can use a current grant that you have, a portion of it to help prepare documents for a submission to receive funds under the Indian Community Development Block Grant. And you can also use a portion of it to prepare applications for other federal programs that the tribe would determine is necessary and appropriate to achieve community development objectives of the tribe. And the next slide, please. One of the initiatives that HUD had and still has information available on the HUD.gov website is with regard to sustainable construction in Indian country. There's several cases across the nation, and St. Regis Mohawk will speak later today. I know they were one of the case studies. And it also has a final report about just the lessons learned and the still barriers yet that there might be. There's a final report that someone could read through to see how beneficial, what kind of solutions, what kind of problems came about as a result of this initiative. And they also listed the homepage that you can click on and go and to see both the final initiative, and you can also see the various case studies and other related information. And the next slide, please. On this slide, I wanted to, this slide and a few after it are just sort of some overarching comments, I guess, regarding some case studies that have been going on in Indian country. And this one was with the Mississippi Band of Choctaw with structured insulated panels and geothermal heating and cooling. Also having that the SIP plant, structured insulated panel plant, there locally to help achieve energy efficiency in their housing. And next slide, please. And on the next slide, this is the Muskogee Creek, another structured insulated panel. You can see with the insulated roof and other features of the housing, making it sustainable for that area, given the climate and sustainability needs in that area. The next slide, just some comments about this one. This is a 8-plex for the Cocopah Indian Housing Tribe through their tribally designated entity, the Cocopah Indian Housing and Development Organization, and they took an existing 8-plex and were able to put energy efficiency improvements in there to make the post-occupancy much more affordable and much more comfortable for the occupants. And then the next slide I have, we don't have a finished product of this particular slide, of this particular project, but it was a 25 unit subdivision that was created or recreated to make it more energy efficient, including all underground utilities, permeable pavement, and solar street lighting. So I just wanted to highlight that very briefly. And on the next slide, I just wanted to talk again about how HUD strongly encourages energy and water efficiency in its funded projects. We've been involved at the HUD ONAP level with other partners like EPA and Department of Energy for several years, having summits and greener tribal homes workshops throughout the nation. We've been a partner with the EPA for National Work Group for Culturally Relevant Building Codes and Toolkit Development. Also looking at post-occupancy utility costs and occupant health with the EPA and other partners, making sure that even as we make homes more energy efficient, that we're looking at what's going on in the building as it operates, because sometimes as you tighten the building envelope, then other issues like mold production and air and asthmatic triggers and such can develop, or even if you do have passive radon controls, you might need to have active ones. Also considering more, also to tell you more about work that's been done with sustainable construction in Indian country, including an annual event with university partners, and also that HUD has process for technical assistance requests. And if you need technical assistance specific to your tribe, you can submit a request for that, and we'll help to get that in process. And right now we've had some requests for greener tribal construction, and also working with climate change and coastal issues. And so we've been working on and planning with one of our partners in my ONAP office and the Seattle one, so that we can hopefully this summer have a couple of tribal construction workshops that are meaningful given climate extremes of both regions, and given particular interest that might be from one region versus another. So we're accommodating all of that interest, including looking at brownfield as another potential resource in Indian country. And then on the next slide, just wanted us to think as I part with my part of the discussion, making sure that we think about ways to plan for energy efficiency, extreme weather, climate. We have some tribes that have hurricane grade roofing and housing standards because of straight line winds and microbursts that are 130 miles an hour. Also making sure we include culturally relevant housing design to help with the sustainability of the community. And again, continuing with the capacity building and technical assistance request, and that long-term federal tribal relationship, making sure that's as efficient as possible, and making sure you reach out to your ONAP grants management specialist for continued discussion. And the next slide is just a thank you, and that's all I have for today.
Well, thank you, Sarah. That was excellent. Our next speaker will be Carrie Nelson. Carrie, stand by while I get up your presentation.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this webinar, and thank you everyone on the phone for your interest in this topic. Again, my name is Carrie Nelson. I am with the Bonneville Power Administration. I work in our Energy Efficiency Department. Next slide. So I'm going to briefly go over a couple slides just to give you an idea of our organization, since it's a little bit unique. We are a nonprofit federal marketing administration. We are in the Pacific Northwest. This is a picture of our headquarters in Portland, Oregon. We are a part of the U.S. Department of Energy, but one difference is that we are non-appropriated. We are funded through the wholesale sales of electric power. Next slide. We provide about 1/3 of the electric power in the Northwest, and we have around 142 utility customers. And I will show you a map of our region in a few slides to give you an idea of what sort of territory that covers. We operate 3/4 of the high voltage transmission system. And in slide 5, the next slide, this will give you an idea of our territory. The bold outline is basically where our public utility territory covers. That is not a solid cover, so that's relevant with our tribal program because I can only do our grant program in our public utility territory, and so not all the tribes in this region qualify for our program. But as you see, this shows where most of our power comes from, which is our hydro dams, and the Columbia River goes right through the center of our territory, which also provides most of our power. Next slide. So I always show a picture of the Columbia River when I present on this topic because it is such an important part to our region. This is a picture taken for those of you that aren't in our area. It's about an hour outside of Portland. It is very beautiful. Many of our hydro dams are on this river, but it's also very relevant to this discussion because so many tribes, this holds a lot of value to many of our tribes in our region, both historically and today. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit just about our legislative history because this sort of provides a backbone for my program, which is a public purpose grant program. In 1980, the Pacific Northwest Electrical Power Planning and Conservation Act was put into place, and that strongly encourages BPA to do conservation and renewables, to make sure we serve our residential and our small farm customers, and to protect fish and wildlife. And through this act and the plans that came out of this act, it also held BPA accountable to make sure that we adequately serve all of our customers. And that is what inspired us to start our low-income grant program to ensure equity when we are providing energy efficiency services. Next slide, please. In 1999, we received feedback from the public, a concern that we were not including the tribes in an equitable way. And so we pulled part of the funding for this grant program aside to distribute directly to tribes. And I will go into that a little bit more specifically in a few slides when I talk about the overall grant program. Next slide, please. And this is just to give you an idea of the tribes of our area. So this is our Washington tribes. This is where most of our tribes are in our region. Next slide is Idaho. And then the next slide is Oregon. And the final slide is Montana. Our territory only goes to the west part of Montana, so Blackfeet and Flathead are within the BPA territory. Next slide, please. Now I'll get into what we're here to talk about. So we have a low-income energy efficiency grant program. It started out as $5 million. It slowly increased slightly every year. Excuse me. And out of this low-income grant program is where we pulled out the Tribal Set-Aside Grant Program. Originally, this grant program was only for weatherization, but we have expanded it to be more of an energy efficiency grant program. And it covers appliances and HVAC system and lighting as well, and I will go more into that. Most of this funding is distributed to the state agencies, and the state agencies distribute that to the county agencies or the community action agencies, who historically have always managed the Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program, and that serves low-income households and weatherizes their homes. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. I know that some people are probably very familiar with that and some people aren't. But essentially, our grants follow the Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program to the T. And that was just to simplify things so that if people wanted to implement our program, they already knew the rules and regulations that was established by the Department of Energy. And with that $4.5 million funding that goes to the states, 3% of that is also required to go to our tribal members, and that is separate from the Tribal Set-Aside Program that I'll talk about today. Next slide, please. So the benefits of this Tribal Set-Aside Program is the most important thing, I think, is that it's a government-to-government partnership. The funding doesn't have to be funneled through the state agencies. It goes directly to the tribe. And that allows for the tribe to sort of design their own program. Our grants have a lot of flexibility, and they can cater it to the needs of their members and also the capacity of their organization and how much staffing they have available to allocate to this program. We have also found that tribal members are much more likely to accept a program that's being offered through the tribe that the tribe has already vetted when they are encouraged to apply for this program. So that's another way that this has been able to streamline these services. And then another component to our program is it offers a certain percentage to be spent on training. And again, originally this program was for weatherization, and sort of the backbone of this program was weatherization. And the Department of Energy has training centers across the nation that are very good for training staff to weatherize homes. And we pay for that funding or other funding such as HVAC, which is heating and ventilation, for tribal members who are doing this program if they want to do all of that work in-house and have some of their staff members gain those skills. Next slide, please. And this is where I mentioned earlier, our program, the grant language in our program essentially says that we follow the Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program. We do allow a little bit of flexibility on top of their program, but if you don't want to utilize that flexibility and you just want to know that you're following the Department of Energy's program, it's just an optional part. But we do allow higher flexibilities for health and safety. It was mentioned actually in the previous presentation as well. We are well aware, and so is the DOE, about the ventilation complications that come along with tightening up a home. And we run into mold and mildew and asthma problems a lot with our program. And so we offer a slightly higher percentage of dollars to be spent on that, as well as related repairs to the house that would help protect the integrity of weatherization measures. A weatherization measure being, for example, attic insulation. If it gets wet because of the part of the roof that's leaking, then that would compromise that. So we can cover those sort of expenses. And then we also have always had a part for education kits for the homeowner, either a box of a light bulb or a thermometer, things that they can put in the house to be more aware of their energy consumption. And lately that has, I've noticed, been expanded also to healthy homes and some of the ways that you can keep the indoor environment of your house healthier. Some of our tribes have taken that funding to use towards that as well. And since that is related to tightening up the house, that's an eligible expense on our grants as well. Also different from the Department of Energy's weatherization program, we don't have a requirement for how old the dwelling is, and they can come back as many times as necessary to that building. There's not a time lapse requirement. And we also don't have a cap on the amount of funding that's allowed to be spent on each individual home. We leave that up to the tribe to decide how they want to distribute the funding. Sometimes with their own priority list, they might want to spend a lot of funding on an elder person's home that has no other options, where other tribes might choose to just do a little bit of work on everybody's home, and we leave that up to the tribe. Next slide, please. So one thing that has been really nice about this program is the level that you can participate in as a tribe. First, let me back up and say that we do outreach to all the tribes that are eligible for our program in the BPA territory, and we do that. We start out with email and a letter, and then we follow up with phone calls, and then usually at that point we have a handful of tribes that have reached out to us that are interested, and then we decide to meet in person because it's just so much more effective to meet in person. The program's really complicated, but there's so many routes that you can uptake our program that it's good to kind of sit down and brainstorm with the tribe before they fill out the application to see what exactly they should aim for, especially in their first year of participating in our program. We have some tribes that have participated every year and other tribes that are new every year. So the size of our grants for tribes range from $2,000 to $100,000, and again, that depends on what they choose to apply for and how they choose to participate. We have in the past done just individual training grants. We don't do those as much anymore, but we still do at times where tribes are interested in getting their members certified to be weatherization crew members. And there's lots of different levels of certification through the Department of Energy's program. And we have a training center. We have a couple training centers in the Northwest. I work frequently with the Washington Bellingham Center because we have so many tribes up there. And you can get certified for different aspects of the weatherization audits and inspections and work that's done in the homes. And so some tribes have grown their crew with just BPA grants to do that training. And what I really like about that as well is that when you're a certified weatherization auditor, whether you're working for the tribe or not, you have that skill forever and you have to maintain your certification, but getting that foundation is a very employable skill these days. So that's what I like about that part of our program. We also have at times just bought equipment for tribes. The Yakama Nation is a good example of this. We first started out just buying them their blower door equipment, which is the weatherization testing equipment, and other equipment related to weatherization. They have their own crew, but it's a lot of money to get all of the equipment to do all the houses that you have to do and to have it on site and find a place to store it and all of that. And so we've helped them slowly gain that, which has allowed them to have their full, all of their weatherization in-house, or helped out with that. And then some tribes take all of this. They do the training, they do the equipment, and they manage their weatherization programs in-house with their entire crew. So we cover the cost of the weatherization equipment, each individual house, the labor to the staff members while they're doing the weatherization, the hourly labor costs, the transportation costs, which can be high when you're traveling into rural areas. And then on top of that, when we expanded beyond weatherization, we expanded to energy efficiency technologies. We have measures that can occur outside this weatherization audit. So for those of you not familiar with weatherization, especially through the DOE program, it is an audit and inspection, and it's a whole test of that specific house to see what that house qualifies for cost-effective weatherization measures. And so we do follow that with our grants, but outside of that, we allow some what we call standalone measures that through our own technical forums, we've determined to be cost-effective in our region as standalone measures. And those are ductless heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, LED lighting, and appliances. And so for those, you can put that into a house without doing a full weatherization audit or an energy audit of the house. And that has allowed for many tribes to try out our program and to jumpstart our program with just that. Specifically lighting and appliances, they can receive a grant and they can put in a bulk order into an appliance store, and usually they will deliver it and pull out the previous appliance and take it out. And so the tribe has been able to participate in our program, get an idea of what it's like, learn how to qualify their homes for the low income aspect of it. And it gives them a taste. It's a great thing for the tribal members, but it's not a full-blown weatherization program yet. So it allows them sort of to dip their toes in the water. Next slide, please. And then I sort of touched onto this in these other slides, but there's different ways, specifically with the weatherization, that a tribe can participate in our program. And like I said, some tribes do it all in-house. They do the outreach, they do the low-income qualifications, they do the actual work, and the whole grant is managed in-house. And those are larger grants, and it's usually with tribes that have participated in our program more than once. The tribe can also collaborate with our state community action agencies. Now, those are the agencies that I talked about earlier that receive funding from the state for the DOE Weatherization Assistance Program. So they already know how to do the program. They already have their certified staff or the contractors that they work with. So the tribe still receives the grant directly, but they hire the community action agency as sort of a subcontractor to do the work. But they can still do the outreach and the qualification and all of that and the marketing for the program. And then the next level to that, or sort of similar, is the tribes can work with other tribes for the weatherization, for specifically the auditing. Since that is a training that is hard to maintain and it takes some effort, not all of our tribes can do the certified auditor, but some of our tribes that have one, their auditor will travel over to another tribe and do the energy audit, the weatherization audit for that tribe, and the inspections. But the tribe still lets their crew do the work, but again, it'll be inspected to make sure it's up to the standards that we need. And next slide, please. Finally, the other thing our program offers, besides paying for trainings that the tribe requests, we host 2 trainings a year. One of the trainings is designed for the program managers, and one is designed for the technical crews that are in the house doing the weatherization training. This is a picture at the Building Performance Center up in Bellingham. This is the tribes that we had on contract at the time, so it's tribes that have a current grant with BPA. These were the program managers, and we come and we meet for 2 days. It allows me to hear how the program's going. I receive feedback about the program. We go through the training center, which has a lot of simulation houses that you can go in. They get to see the work that's done in these houses, which I think is really important for the program managers, because you kind of get into the technical weeds real fast, even if you're just managing the program from the desk. You need to know about the stuff and the work that's being done in the tribal houses, and also to help the community members understand what's going to happen to their house when these crews come in and do this work, because a lot of times you can't tell until you see your utility bill that anything's been done. So the other thing I like about these workshops is that usually I walk away and I make a small improvement to our program. I receive feedback about what it's like to qualify low-income households for tribes and differences that I should be aware of. I also often hear about other funding sources that possibly could be leveraged with ours, but there's a few little kinks in it that make it a barrier. And then I'm also able to tell tribes about things that I've learned about in the field where they might be able to apply for other grants to patch up holes that my program doesn't cover. Next slide, please. And then the other workshop we do is the technical workshop for the folks that are in the field, in the houses doing the work. So this is a picture at Yakima. Yakima has hosted for the last few years since they do have a full certified crew. But the man in the front is a certified trainer for the Department of Energy's weatherization office at the Building Performance Center. So he comes out, he does an in-class training for a few hours, but then we go out to a home that's already been qualified by Yakima for the BPA program. And Yakima weatherizes the home with their crew, but they mentor these guys that are kind of just the up-and-coming crews for the tribes that are participating in our program. And usually they're the installers, the ones that do the kind of construction work for the weatherization for their tribe. And so we work in a house for 3 days, and then at the end of it, these guys have received amazing education, and Yakima has a house done, so they don't lose time on that front. And the next page is also just a picture of the whole crew that showed up for that training on slide 20. And that's again at Yakima. It was like it felt like 150 degrees that day. It wasn't that hot, but it was a hot day. And then the second to final slide. This is a picture of a couple of our tribal members that went through the whole entire certification and got their auditor certification for weatherizing homes, which again, I consider a pretty good employable skill these days since it's such a popular, energy efficiency is going to be so popular. Next slide, please. And this is a picture of a man from the Quileute Housing Authority who did a lighting program with our utility. He was participating in the grant program. The grant program paid for part of it, but we also connected him with the local BPA utility who was also doing a lighting program. So he was able to leverage some more funding to do some more work. Okay, and last slide. This is just sort of a summary of what I think works well. Again, I think visiting with the tribes in person has really helped because tribes have so many offerings and funding sources and grant programs out there. And so it's good to just kind of sit down and talk in person and see if this is the right fit and to kind of design the program to fit right with the tribe. I think directly funding the tribe is very important. I think aligning our grants with DOE has been great because DOE has such a great program, a well-established program that does good work. And I feel good about sending certified staff into homes of low-income houses specifically, knowing that they're not going to screw up the home. I think that helping tribes connect with each other and to learn about each other's programs and how they were able to make our funding work has been very helpful, and also to connect in with their community action agency if they need help with the weatherization aspect of it. The workshops have been great. Our next workshop, we're even expanding a little bit more because I realized that there's so many other energy programs going on out there that we had a discussion with our tribal members, and for our next workshop, we're bringing in folks from nonprofits and other federal funding agencies and renewable agencies, since I don't cover that. And we're all going to present to the tribes, and half of it will be us presenting about our program options, and then the other half will be the tribes giving us feedback on how we can make our programs more implementable from a leveraging standpoint and just from a program implementation standpoint. So that's coming up next month, and I'm excited to try that out. We haven't done that yet. And then lastly, we've just kept our reporting very simple. The tribes keep great paperwork in-house at their offices, but the actual report they submit to me is very simple. And I think that helps with us just keeping the program simple overall. And that is all I have.
Well, thank you, Carrie. What a wonderful program you have, and I appreciate you making the time to present it today. Alexandra, you are up next. Let me bring up your slides. All right, Alex, you're ready. I think you might be muted. Alex, are you there?
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I was on mute. I was talking. Yes, I was muted.
All right,
Hi.
we hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Alexandra, and I'm the former Assistant Executive Director for Tohono O'odham Peak Housing Association. I currently am a consultant now for TOPAT as well as a couple other entities through Desert Diamond Development. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. Slide. Healthy financial budgeting and especially saving energy often begins with saving resources and funding. Sometimes it's difficult for tribes to see the price tags, what it costs to implement some of these energy saving developments, but if the investments are made up front, it's easy to save the funding over time. If you could push down all of, I'm sorry, my slide is all, yes, the little interactive. So a well-run portfolio with loans, grants, investments, stocks, and real estate. It's not necessarily top heavy in one area. It's well diversified. Matching resources in kind, such as land values or staff time, can also save an upfront cost to where you don't have to necessarily put a lot of money up front. Also, you can save money through phasing projects or building out a plan for knowing what you need now. Sometimes it's best if you put in all the infrastructure or site plan up front. So it's good to know how much you can afford and how much you know that needs to be budgeted right away for the phase that you're in. In a bear market, when resources become limited, we often look to partnerships to share the expenses for projects. And who can also benefit from our projects? There's many other agencies that we partner with, such as Indian Health Service, EPA, and we're starting to work with USDA also. There's a lot of different incentives and sometimes subsidies involved. So it's good to know, and especially other partners, federal partners, they have a lot of leads. So it's good to check into your network. Grant partnerships such as universities or agencies, staffing in kind can also be big contributors to matching. Did you push all of the, I think there was one more thing on there. We can go to, there we go, the drawbacks or strings attached conform to the needs of our partners sometimes. So it's not always ideal to partner, but it's good to look into. You don't want to over-conform to certain deals that may not be advantageous for you or your tribe. And often, of course, these leveraging opportunities comes with a lot of strings attached, but as long as you can meet those needs for everybody, it becomes a win-win. Slide. So I'll start with a case study of our organization, the Tohono O'odham Peak Housing Association. We're located in southern Arizona, but we do encompass 3 counties. We are the second largest land-based tribe in the state of Connecticut, including 11 districts. We're operating now more than 160 rentals and I think we're up to almost 500 home ownership units coming online before the end of this year. Our annual IHBG allocation is about $4.5 million, but our annual project and construction operating budget just since 2012, it's become $19 million. Animation. So how did we do that? Going from an annual IHBG allocation to doing projects that are nearly $20 million annually. If you could push all the animations, that would be great, please. In 2012, TOCA had a number of stagnant projects on the books. They were very concerned because these projects, it was very top heavy as far as the ultimate overall cost of these projects. Impending federal legislation threatened to reduce IHBG allocations for several tribes that had large surpluses. So since 2011, we've worked very hard to complete these projects. I think in the past, our predecessors had not completed these projects because, quite frankly, they didn't have the resources and the dollars to do so. So the tasks became overwhelming, and then they piled up. If you've got 10 or 11 large projects on the book with price tags, well over $5 to $10 million each one, and you only have a certain budget, the task obviously becomes daunting. So how do we go about looking at those projects and maybe scaling them down? We don't want to cut off the number of homes that we serve, but we still want to save energy and resources, and we ultimately have to save dollars. So how do we do that? Further, we were challenged by the remoteness and vastness of our desert land-based reservation, which is it's almost 2.8 million acres. It's the second largest land base. Slide. The immediate focus became how to best utilize our dollars to touch as many projects and households as possible in the most effective and efficient manner. So that became, for us, really an energy saving endeavor. So some of our challenges that we had were home sites, familial land sites, land designation and district authority, appraisal disparity. I don't know if anybody else has had these issues, especially in Indian country, when they come out and they don't necessarily have ownership of the land because the tribe owns the land. It's hard to qualify for these loans that are required through the HUD 184 or other entities that require the loans. We worked hard with USDA and also with the EPA to help us kind of overcome these challenges to getting federal guaranteed loans. And we also have a very large stock of traditional homes versus our modern home values. So how do we go in and update these homes that are traditional and they may not have running water, they may not have electricity in some cases? How do we go in and help these homes to become more energy efficient or to weatherize these homes essentially? So there were a lot of challenges. Slide. Infrastructure was a huge challenge, of course. Slide. So TOCA's energy, TOCA's energy saving and development approach considerations, of course, the infrastructure and how much things cost. Opportunities to partner for cost sharing and the impact of resources, such as if we have $1 million, we can essentially get 14 new construction homes for families because we know we have a partial 20% subsidy from this partnering agency. Also, innovation considerations, solar and other energy efficiencies, senior-friendly accommodations, metal framing and studs to reduce termites. Oftentimes, you really have to look at these considerations and say, yes, solar and other energy efficiencies do cost more. Metal framing, of course, it costs almost $10,000 more per unit. But ultimately, over time, we will save those dollars. Slide. So here's an example of our new solar streetlights in South Combe Lake, Babakivri District. we estimate that we will begin to see this project pay off in about 5 years. So the investment that we initially put down to purchase these solar streetlights, besides, the arguments, of course, that they're environmentally friendly, that they help to add to the overall enhancement for what we're going to save for future generations, especially when you're looking at the bottom line and the bottom dollar. What we put into this project, we hope to get it back, or start getting those resources back within the next 5 years. Slide. All animations, please. So, well-balanced portfolio. It begins with well leveraging. Overextended portfolios, you're looking at probably, if you're at more than 55% loans, you should probably be looking to put into other investments to diversify. I think in 2011, TOCA was very, as far as cash and carry. We had resources in the bank, but we really had no loans. We had no partnerships in place, and we were getting no grants. But on the flip side of that, we really weren't getting projects done, and we had a very dissatisfied constituency. Slide. So then and now. This is for last year's, we were at almost $18 million, but we have about 5 to 6 sources now that we are very mixed with our funding. We've got tax credit projects, we've got competitive HUD grants, we have some smaller foundation miscellaneous grants as well as state grants, and probably one of our smallest portions now is our HBG. So we really are becoming more self-sustaining. We're getting more homeowners into our homes. We had probably over 300 to 500 people on our waiting list, and then people just simply gave up waiting for homes. So now I think our portfolio is far more leveraged and funded. We're able to do more projects. Of course, there are a lot of strings attached, especially if you're working with a LIHTC project within the state. Besides that, it's extremely competitive. There's a lot of compliance and monitoring that goes into that. And that doesn't always work well, especially within a traditional tribal community. But, we kind of look at the flip side. We got to take what we can get. We work hard to be in compliance and make sure that our obligations are taken care of. Slide. So the drastic changes within 6 years. Non-competitive operating budget. The only revenues that we were getting was the $4.4 million from the IHBG from HUD. So less than 3% of funds were received through payments from tenants. A non-competitive operating budget, but when we looked at grants and other sources for funding, when we phased projects, we pretty much increased our budgeting and resources almost fourfold. And especially when we're working with our partners, you can go to the next slide, that's fine. It's very important to show results, especially to our funding agencies. We're always talking to Sarah and HUD about our success stories. We really want to talk about specifically the jobs we created, especially with this new administration, how many houses we built, how much infrastructure has been developed. So even though we are housing, we'd like to work with all of our partners. If we're working with the energy company, how much have we added to the footprint of our infrastructure and our homes developed and our energy consumption now, because we are creating more housing. How well have we financed or leveraged ourselves? All of these things and keeping records of that, it helps us for future projects. Slide. So TOCA's results, these are just hard numbers. We've substantially reconstructed or built new construction. We're at more than 100 homes for that level. We've built several hundred rehabilitations, developed community centers, complexes, hundreds of temporary and permanent jobs. And yeah, we've done this in a matter of probably about 6 or 7 years. It took time to start to roll that wheel, but once we did, We've become very competitive. So we're very proud of those accomplishments. Slide. Here's a picture of some of our new solar water heated tanks in Sanivir, Chukutcook, Guachi housing projects. So the last, I would say, 6 of our new projects have these solar water heated tanks. It's an energy saving cost, mostly for the homeowner. It's a higher upfront cost for the association, but we did find some subsidies for these. We're looking to do more solar related projects. Slide. So here's some pictures everybody likes to see of some of our new projects and move-ins. This is, you know, after years of hard work, and these are the families that really benefit, and this is what makes our job so fun. I like to say that our move-ins are the best days at TOCA. The slide on the left is a new air-conditioned unit. That's one of the things that we started doing with projects when we came in. Previously, there were no air conditioning units within our housing division. So we installed air conditioning units. We regularly give classes to home buyers on how to change filters, how to make sure their energy bills stay low and cooling stays low, because previously in our projects, they had only had swamp coolers. And anybody in the Arizona desert knows, especially during monsoon season, those things don't work very well. And especially there were a lot of health disparities with that. We also partner with Indian Health Service for mold and spore reduction, and EPA as well for that. Slide. So this is a symbol of our nation, Tohono O'odham Nation, the man in the maze. We believe it's the paths in life we choose that will ultimately define our character. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate your presentation. I'm sorry I didn't turn off those animations. It made it a little cumbersome, but I'll remember that next time. Anyways, next we got Risa. Let me pull up your slides just a second. All right, Risa, you should be all set.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, James. I do appreciate and thank the DOE for allowing me to be part of this presentation today. I really appreciate it and happy to be here. And my presentation is going to be, basically, I'm going to try to show our path from where we were and where we are today, thanks to all the partnerships that we've been involved in the last couple of years. And disclaimer, I'm presenting not as an expert in these disciplines, but really a practitioner learning along the way. And if other tribes or communities can benefit from our experience as well, that's a good thing for me. Next slide, please. So I'll just start out by telling you a little bit of where I'm from. And I'm from the St. Regis Mohawk tribe, otherwise known as Akwesasne, where we span an international border of Canada and the United States. And there's about 13,000 Mohawks living throughout the territory, both on the northern or Canadian and southern portion of the reservation. And we're part of the Iroquois Confederacy, which includes the Onondaga, Oneida, Mohawk, Cayuga, Seneca, and the Tuscarora. So that leads to a lot of little challenges that maybe many tribes don't have. And the fact that we're on the uppermost portion of the St. Lawrence River gives us throws us into some challenges climate-wise. Next slide, please. And I'll comment briefly that our mission as the TDHE for the St. Regis Mohawk tribe is to develop comprehensive housing programs that will address these areas within our Indian area of service. And we seek to generate, promote community strength, prosperity through safe housing supported ventures, economic development, and program efficiency. And we believe that our mission directly relates to the new energy programs and capital projects we've recently planned out. And what I'm learning, and we had a little bit of an issue adopting these within our staffing. So we've moved away from the ordinary and gone into green development. So now that we've been working on these projects for some time, we're finding that we're really saturating our project planning with the ideals of going green, and it's a given. So my staff knows that if we do anything, it's going to benefit, hopefully benefit the environment. Next slide, please. And so then we've adopted the emerging philosophy, which led to the AHA moving away from the standard construction practices. And since 2004, I've been the director, and it really took that long to move basically a runaway freight train. Why do we have to do things? Why do we have to do new things? Well, I've been able to convince everyone in the tribe and all our community that we will always consider responsible construction. We'll always add energy efficiency measures in our new and renovation projects. We'll always have that urgency for more cultural and environmental awareness and on the long-term effects on our Earth. And we'll always access renewables if and when we can, and we'll create common sense energy programs for our community and focus on finding the resources to support the families that we serve. And the biggest part of what we're doing energy-wise is education, and I'll comment about that a little bit later in some of our programs. So these really are our new policy standards for the Akwesasne Housing Authority. Next slide. And of course, these policies necessitated the increased focus on funding green projects that benefit our target population, because issues affecting low to moderate income families are obvious. We've got high energy costs, we've got high fuel costs included in that, with a high unemployment rate. Our unemployment rate here in the reserve is around 15%, and surrounding areas is more like 6%. So there's a great disparity, and individuals trying to support their families have these challenges moving forward. So the LMI, or low to moderate income families, really struggle to make ends meet under these circumstances, and have for quite a while. So we really want to ease their burden and increase basically the disposable income for the families by instituting a lot of these principles and standards now. Next slide, please. So I guess to maybe feature where we are, I guess I'd like to feature things that we've done in the past. Now, we've accomplished and managed over 400 low-income housing units, mutual help model. About half of those or more have been conveyed so far, so we have a remaining stock of under 200 mutual help units. We do have Sunrise Acres, which consists of 41 low-income elderly rental units. We've provided funding construction for several community facilities in the community, and we continue to be involved in that, and we assisted in Tribe's water enhancement project, and we helped build the water line in the community to improve living conditions for everyone. And we sponsored and created the Akwesasne Boys and Girls Club, renovated an old warehouse, and we continue to support them in assistance to over 300 member kids and their families. Now, one thing to note here is that we've used all standard building practices for these projects. So we do have the construction experience, but when the ARA funds came along, and many housing authorities would remember, we were able to access ARA funding in 2009 and 10 to complete, and well, we had already started planning out Sunrise Acres 2, and that's where we kind of turned the tables and included our first attempts at going green, using green methods, green materials, renewable energy, including ground source heat pumps, the geothermals, and solar practices. The next slide. So I'll just show you a couple of pictures of the Sunrise Acres facility. Now this is an example of one unit with four. It's a quad, so there's 4 units in there, and we built 5 of those, including a training center where we have rentable office space. So basically, it supports its own expenses. We have an outdoor pavilion for the elderly families to have summer picnics and stuff like that. A lot of them go out there and do karaoke, and they have a little band going. So it's really an enjoyable space for our seniors and their families to come visit. Next slide, please. And some of the energy efficiency measures that we institute is listed here. I won't go through all of them, but just make mention that these technologies were really the first time that we adopted and used them, and it was a great learning curve in doing these things. But there were some fun things that we found out too, such as the sun tunnel lighting we put in the bathrooms, and we would get calls from the seniors and say, "I can't shut the lights off in my bathroom." Well, the thing is, they didn't even need to turn the light on, and they could actually live there knowing they don't have to flick on the light. So they really enjoyed these units. And so with this success, next slide, please. The next slide is really just a site, a picture of the site. The original Sunrise Acres complex is located on the right-hand side, and that consists of 21 units in the administration building and our warehouse for our field operations, and the Sunrise Acres Phase 2 is on the left. And it shows the little pavilion at the bottom and the training center. Next slide, please. The next slide just kind of shows the solar panels that flanked the western part of one of the buildings. And then, let's see, next slide, please. That shows the rooftop domestic hot water heating units on the top of the rooftop. So next slide. So we realized after the first year of operations that, hey, we can do this, and there's success here, and there's ways for us to complete these types of measures that, yeah, they were very, very hard for us to adopt internally and to get everybody on the same page. But after a year of operations, our bills were cut in half. We didn't have the fuel truck deliver fuel every month. It resulted in some beautiful, spacious, walkable, livable areas for our seniors, and a lot of them come out in their porches and they visit, and they really have a great life. So we've learned that energy efficiency with energy conservation measures really does save money, and so we wanted to just keep going. So how do we keep going? Next slide. So we realized that we really needed help. So the realization that we needed help. Our first look was to the Department of Energy, and learned that they had an Office of Indian Energy, and they were instrumental in helping us come up with a plan of action. And through their support, and through the support of our tribal leadership, we were able to apply for and be awarded technical assistance from the Department of Energy, Office of Indian Energy, and that they brought along individual experts through Sandia National Labs, National Renewable Energy Labs, and in those efforts, we were able to establish a tribal energy code that would set the standard for our projects in the future. So the Housing Authority really spearheaded these efforts, and we've reached out to the tribal leadership and those programs to be able to try to set the standard for everyone. So what we're doing really is helping others, showing an example of what we can accomplish, and they can too. So the technical assistant, we realized that I don't have the expertise, but there are experts out there. So that was where the technical assistance from the experts in the field came from. Sandia was awesome. National Labs and NREL was awesome. But we also needed something more. We needed to hire knowledgeable consultants with the expertise in dealing with ever-changing regulations. The funding sources are always changing, that sort of thing. So we knew that we needed to get help from experts in the field to not only plan this out, but where we're going to get the money and how to raise funds. So we partnered with an excellent source, the firm of Godfrey & Kahn out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm not plugging them, but they have an honorable mention here because they were able to really help us obtain over $3 million in counting worth of sources through the DOE. We received a couple of grants through those guys, and we're working projects now. So we actually went through ICDBG, and we were able to get awarded a $600,000 grant And our score was 100 of 100, so I'm pretty proud of that. Next slide, please. So part of what we went through as part of the Department of Energy's technical assistance, we did this in 2015. We came together we invited the tribal organizations and tribal agencies, our leadership, and involved stakeholders in our meetings, and we were able to come up with these principles that our vision really was to do responsible construction that met our community's needs, and we had to have that accountability for traditionally held principles that conserve energy and in consideration of our economics and of our families, really nuts and bolts of how do people pay their bills and stuff. We really had to not just have this thought and idea, but to really say realistically what we wanted to do. And we want to provide healthy, affordable, energy efficiency to the community in more than one or two ways. And eventually we want to have energy independence and be able to share this knowledge and maybe spearhead some efforts with our the northern portion of Akwesasne in Canada. So someday we want to have an international effort to push our energy goals. Next slide, please. And so from that point forward, we've formulated a lot of our housing goals with this sustainability in mind. And this really pushed us and led us to thinking outside the box. And 5 of the programs our projects I'm going to just highlight here. And we are rebuilding our community's first solar farm, which is the AHA Go Solar Initiative. We're hopefully going to create 3 new net zero buildings through our net zero initiative. We're expanding our Sunrise Acres into a 3rd phase, and first time developing programs and jumping into permanent supportive housing for Native American veterans, homeless, and permanent supportive housing for the frail, elderly, and disabled. And we're also in the midst of completing our high energy efficiency initiative. And all these projects have elements of conservation, renewables, and such. Next slide, please. And I'll talk a little bit more about those coming up. But we really had no choice with our dwindling federal money. Our block grant is tearing down because of conveying some of our housing. We're lacking some of the resources. So we've got to look outside our federal resources. So we were able to tap into some state energy programs through NYSERDA. We were able to get some capital funds and try to access some energy incentives towards our projects. HUD Indian Community Development Block Grant Program, we're awarded 2 awards at $600,000 each for the programs I just mentioned. And for the first time, we were able to access home funds out of the state of New York. We were able to be awarded $2.2 million towards the Sunrise Acres expansion, and also $800,000 through New York's temporary, they call it OTDA, Homeless Housing Assistance Corporation. And first tribe to access these programs, including our newest award was through the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York for $540,000 for our project. Next slide, please. So we've been busy the last couple of years trying to make those partnerships, and we've realized we cannot do this alone. So I'll just kind of explain quickly what we're doing with the Go Solar Initiative, which is a community-scale solar. In New York State, you're able to do net metering. So we are building we're hoping to, cut ground in the next couple of months, and we're going to install a 1.165 kilowatt service so that we can supplement the housing-related buildings on the reservation. And the electrical power from the solar facilities will be utilized under National Grid's net metering program to offset AHA's buildings and some tribal member residences. And my biggest thing here is we're not just going to give away the power. What we're going to do is educate people, and the big part of this project is to complete educational programming and have special agreements in place that will champion energy efficiency, will champion energy conservation for the families, and in return, the families will receive energy credit to help pay their electric bills. We're hoping to offset those costs for the families by 20 to 30% at first. So we are starting small. Next slide, please. So we're not sure how we're going to complete those programs specifically, but we're working on the plan now. So there will be ground-mounted installation off-site, and the tribe was able to ask the tribe to set aside at least 25 acres of tribal territory for just solar development. For Go Solar, we'll be utilizing 8 to 10 acres for the project, and the remaining acreage will be for future tribal solar, because we know people are going to want to buy into this. It saves money. Why wouldn't they? And so a couple of challenges. We've located this on currently reclaimed Indian lands from a former municipality who leased Indian lands for 100 years, and we've been trying to get it back, and it's currently obtained back from the tribe and in a land into trust with the BIA. Some of the challenges are that the tax investors that we're dealing with just need a comfort level to keep going with the process, and we're working through this process now. And this is why it's very important for us to hire the consultants with the expertise and make sure that you keep the tribe informed and have their tribal legal involved, so that everybody's on the same page going forward. Really, my staff, myself, we could never do this alone without this expertise. Next slide, please. I'm just showing the solar farm site, the 8 to 10 acres that we're going to be using up. So there's a big part of, it's a 660 acre parcel that the tribe is getting back as tribal land. So this is a small portion of that, just to give you an idea. Next slide. So under this, tribal members, this is a really exciting deal for our tribal members. So they can participate in the tribe's DG program, a distributed generation program. I'm still getting familiar with the lingo and stuff like that, so it's all new to myself as well. So we have to be located behind a non-residential host utility meter, which is the Akwesasne Mohawk Casino, which is located just north of the site that is showed in the last slide. And it will result in generated value stack credits for electricity production in excess of the host usage. And we'll be able to allocate the credits to the project members pursuant to applicable utility tariff. So all of these things are starting to come together in what they call a PPA, or a power purchase agreement, and we're working on all that legal stuff at this point in time. Okay, so that's Go Solar. You can advance to the next slide, please. Our Net Zero initiative, which I mentioned earlier, is tied directly into the solar farm, and we're going to be able to, with our supportive housing units, which aren't constructed yet, but we're hoping to break ground by mid-May. So we're going to work for these two supportive housing units to work towards net zero, and also we chose the Boys and Girls Club facility to try to get them involved in all these energy efficiency measures. So we produced a project that could conceivably have the Boys and Girls Club save on their utilities. Next slide, please. And just showing the building of the Boys and Girls Club, then they can conceivably save $28,000 at least on an annual basis of their utilities. So that's an exciting goal for us. Next slide, please. And like I mentioned before, we hope to have the groundbreaking mid-May for the Sunrise Acre Complex Phase 3, which is supportive housing for homeless veterans and seniors, and there will be 6 units for the homeless veterans, 12 for the frail, elderly, and disabled. And we will be completing this project, furthering our energy goals. We'll be utilizing electric heat pumps. So again, no fossil fuels will be delivered. We will reduce carbon emissions, and these facilities will be the tribe's first net zero facilities. Comfortable area for seniors. We'll be offering walking paths, gathering spaces for their families, community gardens type things, the seniors now enjoy this, but these seniors who need extra help and will have support services in place with the utilization of MOUs with tribal and regional service providers. So I'll just mention the supportive housing piece is something we're also new to, because supportive housing, well, I guess we used to do supportive housing, but we just didn't have a name for it. Now what we get to do is put a name to it, put agreements in place, and make sure all our bases are covered. Next slide, please. And I'll just show you a couple of schematics on our 12-unit supportive housing. And we're really excited about this because it's groundbreaking to us. I mean, to us, this is one of our best projects to date. And we're putting into practice all those new standards of construction. Next slide, please. The next one is just a picture of the 6-unit homeless veteran supportive housing. We've heard for years that the veterans are not supported, and we've heard a lot of individuals are homeless, but there's no place really for them to go. So we formulated this plan based on the needs of the community. Next slide, please. And I'll just show you the site plan, overall site plan, and the Veterans Building will be at the north side of the site, the little orange rectangle at the top, and then the L-shaped structure on the bottom is the seniors complex. And these were very, just putting this piece together, the financing piece together, and making sure we had the green and sustainable practices in it. Yes, it does cost money, but it'll be well worth it in the end. And these are funded. We got the home funds and the New York State Homeless Housing Funds, and we're utilizing the AHA Block Grant Program and NYSERDA funds in the Federal Home Loan Bank on this project. And that's what's going to keep us busy this year. Next slide, please. Now, the next project, the high energy efficiency project, was really a combination. Talk about leveraged funds, a combination of federal and state resources, including HUD's ICDBG program. We wrote a grant and we received $600,000 from the ICDBG, and then we utilized our Indian Housing Block Grant for some of the leveraged funds. And we're able to access NYSERDA's Empower program for the very low income and NYSERDA's Assisted Home Performance program for low to moderate income families. Next slide, please. And what we did was we took a sampling of our older projects and said, okay, we really need to increase the energy efficiency. We need to improve them, but we want to know how to do it. So what we did was we accessed, part of what NYSERDA was able to give us was everyone in the state of New York were accessing these funds, but no one on the reservation because nobody really knew about it. So this kind of opened up a great big learning curve for us and the tribe and some local contractors. And we really helped to raise the awareness of this program, not just to our participants, but other people, other tribal members who could benefit from the program. It's really meant close coordination with those local contractors that had to be NYSERDA certified, and that was a critical part of the project. So we're assisting hopefully up to 100 LMI families, and we're 3/4 of the way through. We should be done by June. It included upgrades to older homes, such as say roofs. If someone needs a roof and NYSERDA comes in there and does some work, we don't want to compromise that work. So if it's bad enough, we'll try to leverage other funds and try to get that person a new roof. And that will lead to obviously lower utility costs and better energy efficiency in the home. And part of the participant in this program, in the HEAP program, will be that they'll educate their families. They'll be part of an energy program and training modules that we're putting together, and basically helping each other meet those energy goals. And that was my last slide in the programming. So the next slide is just a picture of that reminds us that we are doing all of this not so we can keep our jobs, or not so that we we're going to make ourselves look good, but we really are doing this for our generations, our young ones and older and our future generations. And there was a study done in our community some years ago in 2009, and they did a study with the kids, with our youth, and they all pointed to these principles. And so a lot of what we've done is because of that foresight and because that's what they want. So that's really why we're doing what we're doing. And I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you, Risa. That was excellent. You guys really got a lot going on there. That must keep you very busy. Thanks for spending the time with us today to share.
Very busy.
Next, we're going to hear from Sean. So, Sean, just one moment. I'll pull up your slides. All right, you should be all set.
Great. Thank you, James, and thanks to all the other speakers. It's been great learning about some of the activities and some of the updates on some of the ones I was already aware of. I'll keep this pretty quick so that we have time for questions and answers, but I want to provide some overviews and links to additional information that you can go out and find. So, James, next slide. So this first one is just some renewable energy web resources that are out there. Obviously, there's more than this, but these are ones that we tend to use here at the National Renewable Energy Lab and ones that we recommend to others. So I won't go through each of these. I will remind all the attendees that we'll be sending out a link to where these slides will be posted, so you will have access to all of these links following the webinar. But just some highlights here. That first one, the database of state incentives to renewables and efficiency. You can type in your zip code out there. It will show you all of both the state and federal incentives that are available to you. So that's great. Whenever I do any work on like my own home, for example, I always go out and look for any utility incentives or other incentives that I might be able to take advantage of when doing that. The second one there, PV watts, great for doing some quick calculations to project possible costs in energy production of solar, really user-friendly. Don't need to be an expert to go out there and use that and figure it out. Some others on there, we have GIS tools and data further down. Those are going to be resource assessment maps, so really great for seeing what technologies might be available in your area. And then the last one on this bulleted list is a solar RFP template, so request for proposals template. This is for grid-connected PV systems, but it's a really great plug and play template, so you can use this to get your RFP started should you be pursuing any solar PV projects. And so next slide.
All right, Sean, I clicked the wrong link there. Let me bring your slides back up.
And so the next slide is for the FEM training that's out there. This is free and available to everyone, and just a list, obviously, of the topics. Obviously, there's a lot of topics covered. There are actually more than what I've listed here as well. So if you are starting a project, want to learn more about something, definitely recommend going out and checking some of these topic trainings out before doing so, or to get up to speed on some technologies that maybe are just of interest to you. And so next slide. And then I want to capture some residential energy efficiency resources that are online. Have these split up into general efficiency. There's some guides on Energy Star heating and cooling, some guides for lighting. You can look at different LED options, and the Energy Star Choose a Light guide, really helpful. And you know, LEDs can be a little bit confusing as far as they have the different color options and things like that. So that provides some information there. Appliances and equipment. Really, Energy Star appliances have come down so much in cost that when buying new appliances, it only makes sense to really buy Energy Star. The payback periods on those are so short that economically it makes the most sense. And so that gives you some overviews on that information. And then building envelope, which is basically insulation and how well buildings capture and maintain heating and cooling. And then next slide. And then some information on both air source and ground source heat pumps. If you're looking to do any new construction or retrofit any existing buildings or HVAC, these are some links you could check out for information on that. And so that I'll wrap up there. Again, these slides will be available after the webinar. Definitely check them out and feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions.
Thanks, Sean. What a great list of resources there. And as you mentioned, all those links will be available when we post the slides online. So next, we're going to go to our question and answer period of the webinar. So as a reminder, you can submit written questions by clicking on the question button on your control panel and typing your questions there. And I will ask them to the list of panelists. So let me go to my questions here and see what we have. Hold on a moment. All right, so here's a HUD question probably. It says, are there any grants available with HUD in regards to funding a housing project on Navajo Reservation? We have a TDHD for the tribe, however, our program is not low income and is not open to the public. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, excuse me, I have a bit of an allergy cough sometimes, but I guess it would be best to talk with the Navajo Housing Authority because they're the recognized, really designated housing entities, and also to talk with our Albuquerque staff. But they would be most knowledgeable about the Navajo Nation and housing opportunities as well as energy efficiency opportunities with the Navajo Nation. To my knowledge, the programs that they do have are for low-income people. I'm not aware of any that are only for over-income, but I guess it'd be good to help with some more follow-up with that question. If the person wants to, they can email me, and then I'll make sure I get them in contact with the right stakeholders.
Great, thanks, Sarah. I'll pass on your email address to the questioner.
Oh, perfect, thank you.
Sure. Another question, this one's for Carrie. It says, is this grant available to non-public or low-income housing?
Hi there. No, our program unfortunately is only available to BPA BPA public utility territory. And it is a low-income program. I did talk a lot about the Department of Energy's Weatherization Assistance Program, and I know that is the national level program that's usually funded through the states and community action agencies. But mine specifically is not.
Okay, great. Another question here. It says, in New York State, the state has incentive programs for creating community shared solar farms with up to 5 megawatts in size. Is DOE funding available as matching share so private sector developer can finance and develop such projects at tribes located in New York? So I'm not sure who specifically that would be a question for, but does anybody have any thoughts on that?
This is Risa, and I'm going to say yes. We received grants through the Department of Energy, and we shared those grants with some New York State NYSERDA. What's going to be big in our Go Solar project is that there are incentive programs through NYSERDA and National Grid that are going to help us complete our projects. So there are resources, yes, in New York State for these kinds of projects.
Great, thank you. And to the questioner, I'll send you a link, also an email address for the an individual at DOE who may be able to help you answer the DOE side of funding. All right, a follow-on question here. Sustainable green waste management, when combined with low-cost on-site solar power and stormwater management, can create jobs. What grants are available to fund such projects on the tribal land? Food waste combined with yard waste can be composted to make fertilizer, and greenhouses grow food, could use solar power from the roof and recycled stormwater to operate locally grown food for area communities. Can such projects be funded in New York State? So I guess that's another question that you might have some insight on, Lisa.
Those kinds of projects we're actually interested in developing in the future, but we haven't gone that far as to get the information. So I wouldn't know, but I would know who to ask. So if that person might want to contact me, I would be more willing to help point them in the right direction.
Great, thanks, Rita. I appreciate that. One last Rita specific question. Sunrise Acres is expected to use electric heat pumps instead of fossil fuels, but where is that electric being generated? Is the plan to power those with energy generated from the solar farm under this proposal?
Yes, we actually are going to be we're going to still be plugged into National Grid service. And so we're hoping to be able to generate power through our solar farm to cover all of our electrical usage. But we still have to have an agreement with National Grid. And if we don't generate enough electrical power, then we're going to be probably still paying National Grid. So, but the goal is to go net zero. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Is there any program that will provide micro combined heat and power design and engineering assistance? I'm not sure if that might be a question for HUD as well as BPA, whether either of your programs can fund combined heat and power on a small scale.
This is Sarah. I guess in my presentation for HUD, I didn't really talk about economic development as a possible opportunity under the Indian Community Development Block Grant, but it's possible something like that could be an eligible activity under that, but also under the public facilities when we talk about water and wastewater treatment plants, and this kind of production plant might not really be any different. It's still a public facility. It's there generating power for predominantly for low-income people, for all people, but probably predominantly for low-income people. I think there might be a way to design a project that would fit under either a public facilities or an economic development opportunity. Right. I just would encourage whoever has the question to talk with their local HUD office about that opportunity. I think that would be a good starting point, and if they're not sure who that is, they can contact me, and I'll be also happy to refer them on to the correct people.
Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Another question here, specifically for Rita, says we weren't sure if ICDBG was going to put out for solicitation this year, 2018. Do you happen to know any information on that?
I believe that there was an RFP in 2017, and I believe ICDBG was funded in 2018. So, yes, I believe that program is going to be available in the next year.
That's correct.
I guess that's a better question for Sarah. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
good.
Yeah. And Rita's exactly correct. There is a budget for ICDBG this year, along with IHBG. And then hopefully soon we'll know how all those final allocations work out for each tribe, and then hopefully one day we'll know when the funding notice is available for ICDBG. But we always tell people, even if the notice isn't out yet, it's not too early to plan and to use last year's funding notice as a good guide for preparing your applications and such.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Are there other loan resources for solar development from Treasury Direct in relation to the Indian Finance Act of 1974? I guess I'm not familiar with that personally, so does anybody have an idea of what they're referring to? Hearing none, I will forward this on to our DOE representative and see if they can get you an answer. But for now, we'll move on. Is there BPA funding for South Dakota tribes?
No, unfortunately, the Bonneville Power Administration is just for the Northwest, mainly those 4 states, Washington, Idaho, Montana, and Oregon.
Understood. Thanks, Gary. Let's see. In most remote Alaskan communities, propane costs exceed $10 per gallon. The stateside cost is less than $2 per gallon. Is there any program that would help reduce transportation costs of propane?
I'm not aware of any. This is Sarah from HUD, but I don't know if it's something that the GSA could help with, because sometimes they have opportunities for transportation. I don't know if in that area, but that might be a resource to look into. The local GSA representative might be able to help that. I believe there's somebody right in Anchorage.
Great. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, I'm not aware of, this is Sean, I'm not aware of any programs. Transportation costs for all fuels in Alaska is definitely an issue. You could try checking out that database of state incentives, see if there's something available sometime. But that would be my only suggestion. I've never heard of anything.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, and this is James. I used to work in Alaska as a state energy office, and I also am not aware of anything. Outside of state power cost equalization subsidies, but not related to heating fuel. Next question: does NREL or Sandia charge a fee to come out and look for site evaluation regarding solar projects?
If the tribe applies for the DOE's technical assistance program and is approved, then the tribe, that service can be provided free of charge to the tribe. So just have to go out to their site, follow the instructions on the technical assistance form, and then if that is approved, then that service can be offered free of charge.
Great, thanks, Sean. Last question here. Is there a database that goes over the energy buyback program in every state? It might be a question for you, Sean.
Yeah, I think they're talking about net metering. If that's the case, then that very first link on the slides that I had does cover the net metering policies for every single state. So the link I'm talking about is the database of state incentives for renewables and efficiency. And if you go out there and either type in your state or your zip code, it will tell you if what policies are available there.
Great, thank you, Sean. And that's all the questions. Good questions, everyone. That's all we have at this time. So let's see what we got here for our final bit of the webinar. Thanks to all our speakers for their informative presentations. We've already answered your questions. Sorry, I got my script mixed up a little bit here. Having answered your questions, we need to end the webinar at this time. Please give us feedback on the presentations today. We are very interested in your suggestions on how to strengthen the value of this training. Here's a list of our remaining webinars for the 2018 series. The next webinar is Best Practices in Tribal Energy Business Models, and that is on the last Wednesday of April at the same time, April 25th. Thank you again for your interest. Have a good day. And those that asked questions where we said we will give you the contacts of some of our panelists, we will do that shortly after today's call. Thank you for everyone's participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.